Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Malicious Compliance. Our first post is by Bacon Lasagna Shrimp. The car is a disgrace. I've been wanting to get this off my chest for years. Our company had a modest sedan that was provided to a coworker and me to use as needed if we had a task in the field. I always kept it clean, whereas my coworker would leave trash and personal items in it. One fateful day, the regional manager came to visit. The boss took him to a current project using the car. Needless to say, the car was a mess. I hadn't used it in over 2 weeks. Boss got an attitude with me because the car was filthy. I'm an engineer, not a car wash employee. He then put out a memo stating the car was a disgrace and henceforth will be kept clean, and that anything not belonging in the car needed to be thrown away before it was returned. The tone he took was insulting and demeaning. The next time I used the car was a week or so later after the boss had used it. When I was getting back in to return, I noticed a set of keys barely visible between the seat back and seat. I retrieved it and realized it was my boss's key ring. In the many years that have passed since, I have come to feel it was wrong to toss the keys in the trash. I confess that was childish of me. Still, part of me is glad I did it. Our next post is by Mother Practice. You don't want me to work after I put in my 2 weeks, okay? So when I was in my early 20s, I worked at a well-known sandwich franchise. I actually really liked my job, and I would open and close. I'd also come in whenever anyone called out because I lived 5 minutes away. One day my boss hires a new person, no big deal. Except my boss kept cutting my hours more and more and giving them to the new person. I went from working 30+ hours a week to working less than 15. Oh, and I was training them. So after a few months of my hours getting cut but me still coming in whenever called, I put in my 2 weeks. My boss proceeded to not schedule me a single hour after that. Cue malicious compliance. One of my coworkers who would call in regularly didn't come in to open the store at 6 a.m. I drove by at 11 and it was still dark. My old boss had called me to ask if I could open for her. Nope, you didn't want to give me any hours after I put in my 2 weeks, figure it out. Well, I drove by that store for a couple weeks and wouldn't you know it was only open half the time. Our next post is by Lime Orchard. We have to go a meeting instead of a funeral. Try us. First things first, I am not the one doing this malicious compliance. Second, this is a repost due to my original post being removed due to uncertain fallout. I have now asked around and got some certain feedback. I am a student of a public school district which was recently taken over by the state government. Early on into the school year, one of my classmates died. We weren't told how they died. The funeral for the student was scheduled on the same day a mandatory meeting for teachers in the district was scheduled. My teachers got into a week-long argument with the district about whether or not they can go to the funeral. The district said, "You have to show up at the meeting." Cue malicious compliance. The teachers that were going to the funeral, I counted 8. Showed up at the meeting. My teachers said that they took one step inside, then walked back to our cars. When at the funeral, I counted 8 teachers and several consultants. Consultants didn't have to go to the meeting. And now the aftermath. Good news, my teachers haven't been fired. Our next post is by Sick Sill. Take notes of everything you say in the meeting. Okay, but it will get you fired. So this happened a few years ago. And I will be vague since I'm still not sure if the dust has fully settled from this fiasco yet. At my former company, I was the secretary for a small improvement team that would meet monthly to discuss issues within the company and brainstorm ways to fix them. Something you need to know about me is that I was given this role because people know I am meticulous at keeping records due to hour-related issues I had at a previous place of employment. I don't think my boss realized that this careful record-keeping applied to her as well, especially when she appointed me to be secretary of this little committee, but I digress. I was a model employee, award-winning, and went above and beyond what was asked, as were many others in my department. But we were still having customer complaints and dealt with regular safety issues due to the company at large, and through no fault of our own. When we brought these concerns to our boss's attention, emails were left unread, and during in-person exchanges we were called whiny, needy, and were told that we needed to just deal with it. Whatever the issue, from items being stolen by customers to people being unhappy with the procedures the boss had set down for us to follow, it was always made to somehow be our fault. When we sought support from other departments, we were met with cold indifference, since the boss was great to them, and we must be exaggerating the things she said to us. Well, during an improvement meeting at the end of the fiscal year, it all came to a head. Myself and a couple of my team members dug our heels in and were insistent about the unresolved issues the boss refused to acknowledge, and she finally went off on us. She told us everyone was incompetent, didn't deserve our jobs, and that maybe customers would like us more if we were more likable. When people pressed her on safety issues, she continued to reiterate that we would just have to deal with it, and that if someone was going to die, they already would have, right? I, as the secretary, did my duty, and took notes of all that happened over the course of that meeting. I usually did bullet points, but that night I was feeling a little more thorough. So I wrote down words. Every word that was said, every hateful comment, denial of accountability, and idle threat was recorded in black and white. Now, the second part of my job was to distribute the notes from the improvement meeting to the rest of the company. So, come the next morning, I ran about 100 copies of the transcript of the meeting and hand-delivered them to every single department in the building, and things blew up. People from other departments who had attended the meeting were able to verify that everything I had typed up had really been said, and folks were mad, threatening to quit and refusing to do their normal duties, browsing Indeed during work, etc. My boss's boss, who worked at HQ. So I didn't get the opportunity to hand her a copy. Got wind of these meeting minutes only a few hours after I had handed them out and had an hour-long off-the-record conversation with me about all the safety issues I had documented, all the concerns I had submitted to management in writing, and all the records I had regarding my boss's inaction. She was very grateful for the 100 pages of documentation I sent over and thanked me for my time. The day after I unleashed Pandora's box, I put in my 2 weeks' notice, took a new job, and pieced out to greener pastures. At first, it seemed like things were calming down after I left, but the following year, the company did not renew my boss's contract. I still feel a bit bad because I wasn't trying to get her fired or ruin her life. I was just desperate for some accountability thrown her way to create some positive change in the company. But at the end of the day, I just did what she had asked me to do. Our next post is by Monty Python. Strong-arming me into a viewing? Fine, but you won't get inside the apartment. I'm renting an apartment from a company whose renting agents are somehow all unprofessional, late, and kinda slow. Had a plethora of issues with them throughout 10 months, but that's a story for another time. As I've told my landlord, I'll be moving out. They instructed their agents to find a new tenant for the apartment. The way it worked, the agent would email me with a proposed date and time, and I would confirm that I'll be in at that time. I've got a cat, so I insisted on being present during the viewings. The agents never had keys. I think that's because the landlord's office is at the other end of the city, and they can't be bothered to drive an extra hour each time there's a viewing to pick the keys up and then drop them off. So they relied on me to let them in each time, apart from a couple of unannounced show-ups, followed by passive-aggressive emails about the messy property. All was well, until a week ago. The agent emails me saying they've got a viewing on the 13th. I respond saying I've got work that day, and won't be able to do 13th. She simply replies, "If you won't be able to accommodate this request, I'll ask the landlord for a 24-hour notice of entry, which is legally enforceable." Okay, do that. The day comes, I get a call. "We're downstairs. Congratulations, but I'm not home. I hope you brought keys this time, man. I wish I could see her face then." We went back and forth a bit. She tried to threaten me with legal action, to which I just replied that I don't object to them entering. They're unable to enter through their own negligence, and I have nothing to do with it naturally. Got an email from the landlord asking me to be more cooperative next time, which was promptly ignored. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.